Delta Force returned to the headlines after U.S. military exercises shook California neighborhoods with helicopters, controlled explosions, and simulated gunfire in urban areas. On June 9, 2026, this training gained political significance because it happened at the same time Washington was increasing pressure against the Cuban regime. Marco Rubio casts doubt on any agreement with Havana. Trump keeps the threat of tougher action on the table, and Cuba tries to respond with an image of resistance. Armed civilians and Raul Castro reappearing at an official event surrounded by military personnel. What seemed like just another troop exercise turned into a signal for the entire region. The communist island is experiencing blackouts, fuel shortages, scarcity, and internal tension. While the United States shows that its special forces continue training for urban environments, rapid entry operations, rescue, and high-risk crisis situations. Havana tries to project strength, but the message that comes through is different. When a superpower trains elite troops at this level and at the same time puts pressure on the Cuban regime diplomatically, economically, and in terms of security, no one in Cuba can see this as a simple coincidence. What was Delta Force doing? Why did this training become a warning for Havana? How did Trump and Rubio turn Cuba into a political and military target? I'm about to tell you all of that. If you like this kind of direct and uninterrupted content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The training took place in Southern California, with reports from cities like Long Beach, Pasadena, and City of Industry. Residents reported being startled during the night, local authorities warned about military activity, and the American press confirmed helicopters, controlled explosions, and simulated gunfire. The public information did not detail all the objectives of the operation, and that's normal when it comes to special forces. What is known is that the exercise was conducted by United States military personnel in an urban environment, using empty buildings and structures that simulate real crisis situations. This type of training is not done for show. It's done for tough situations with little time, high risk, and quick decision-making. That's where the case gains strength within the Cuban crisis. The training didn't happen in isolation. It comes after weeks of direct pressure from Washington against Havana. Trump and Marco Rubio stepped up their rhetoric against the Cuban regime, and Rubio said that the chance of a negotiated solution is not high. In practice, this means that the White House looks at Cuba and doesn't just see an old dictatorship trying to survive. It sees a security threat, a structure linked to internal repression, external influence, and instability in the Caribbean. The island is too close to American territory to be treated as a distant problem. Cuba tries to respond with a show of resistance. The regime released mobilization messages, talked about civilian preparedness, and let the idea of armed civilians to defend the revolution circulate. But this rhetoric clashes with the reality on the streets. A regime that needs to show a rifle in the hands of a civilian to pretend it's in control is admitting, even without saying it, that it's afraid. Real strength doesn't need to shout all the time. Those who shout too much are usually trying to hide weakness. Raul Castro also reappeared in Havana at an event linked to the Ministry of the Interior after being accused in the United States because of the case of the civilian planes shot down in 1996. His image, already elderly and surrounded by military authorities, was used by the regime to convey continuity and defiance. But the political effect can also be the opposite. Internally, it tries to keep its base loyal. Externally, it tries to say that it still hasn't given in. Miguel Diaz-Canel and Bruno Rodriguez responded by attacking Washington. The Cuban government accuses the United States of aggression, of tightening sanctions, and of trying to justify military pressure. This reaction was already expected. Every cornered regime calls external pressure an attack. Why has the island reached this level of dependency, poverty, and fear? Cuba blames the embargo for everything, but it doesn't explain why a political elite has controlled the structure of the state for decades. Trump enters this equation with his own style. First, he tightens the pressure, then lets the other side choose whether to negotiate or pay the price. That's how it was in several foreign disputes. In the Cuban case, the military threat works as a political tool, but also as a warning. It doesn't mean that an operation is publicly announced for tomorrow. It means that the White House wants Havana to believe that this option exists. And in geopolitics, sometimes a well-placed threat already changes the opponent's behavior before the first real move. The confirmed fact is that there was urban military training in California, with a strong presence of air assets and simulated actions in buildings. The confirmed fact is that Trump and Rubio increased pressure against Cuba. The confirmed fact is that Raul Castro reappeared at an official event after the American accusation. The confirmed fact is that Cuba is experiencing a serious crisis of energy, fuel, and social strain. The strategic assessment is that all of this together creates an atmosphere of alert for Havana. The Cuban regime knows that Washington is testing the limits, language, and reaction time. Delta Force carries symbolic weight because it is associated with extremely high-risk missions, rescues, counterterrorism, and sensitive operations. The very mystery surrounding these units amplifies the message. When videos of urban exercises start circulating and the region is already tense, the natural question arises: why train now in this way in an urban environment while Cuba is under maximum pressure? Washington doesn't need to answer everything. Silence also communicates. For the Cuban regime, uncertainty is part of the fear. The Maduro case has resurfaced in political conversations because Trump supporters use Venezuela as an example of how special operations can become a tool for change on the Latin American chessboard. It serves as a reminder to Havana's allied regimes that ideological shielding doesn't guarantee security. Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua are watching the same move. The United States has once again started talking about force, sanctions, intelligence, and direct pressure. The Cuban G2 is also part of this analysis because Havana's security has always been presented as the regime's strong arm. For decades, Cuba exported methods of surveillance, infiltration, and repression to its allies in Latin America. Now, as the pressure returns to the island itself, the regime tries to show internal mobilization and popular courage. But a propaganda machine can't replace real capability. A tired population, without power and without food, doesn't become a wall just because the government spreads military rhetoric. The meeting between Cuban military officials and the United States Southern Command at the end of May also shows that security channels remain active even in a tense atmosphere. That doesn't reduce the risk. On the contrary, it confirms that both sides know that any mistake can escalate quickly. When there is direct military communication in a politically tense environment, it's because everyone understands that the crisis has moved beyond the symbolic stage. Havana wants to avoid surprises. Washington wants to make it clear that it's monitoring. Trump and Rubio know that a dictatorship facing an economic crisis and lacking social trust is more vulnerable than a dictatorship that is only diplomatically isolated. Peru's situation is part of the same regional chessboard. Keiko Fujimori gained ground with overseas votes in a tight race against Roberto Sanchez. And the market reacted better when the right regained ground. This fact matters because it shows a Latin America divided between two paths. On one side, left-wing projects promising to rebuild everything from scratch, replace the constitution, increase control, and repeat formulas that have already bankrupted other nations. On the other side, a conservative reaction that tries to restore order, market, and security. Cuba watches this with concern, because every defeat of the left in the region isolates Havana even more. I'm Milson Alves, an international relations specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.